Now, if you look at the cardiomyocyte, which are the contractile cells of the heart, which actually contract and squeeze the heart. These cells are very different from the pacemaker cells. They have a stable resting membrane potential of -90 millivolt, and they can depolarize only when they receive a stimulus from the SA node or any other nodal cell, right? So they don't randomly depolarize. So when the action potential reaches the non-pacemaker cells, the first channels to open up are the voltage-gated sodium channels. The sodium ions rush into the cell, and the cell begins to depolarize. As the cell begins to depolarize, more sodium channels open up and more sodium ions flood into the cell. As the cell membrane potential reaches to positive 30 millivolt, the sodium channels shut close and the calcium channels open up. Now, the first calcium channels to open up are the membrane calcium channels. These are voltage gated, slow acting calcium channels, and they admit only a very small amount of calcium ions into the cell. And these calcium ions that have entered a cell then bind to the sarcoplasmic reticulum and open up ligand-gated calcium channels. When the ligand-gated calcium channels open up, calcium ions pour into the cytosol from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So you can see that these slow-acting calcium channels create a plateau phase over here. So this phase is prolonged, and this is very different from what you would see in skeletal muscles and neurons. So this plateau phase lasts for about 250 milliseconds, and they last for a longer time, whereas in skeletal muscle and neurons, they last only for about 2 milliseconds. So this prolonged plateau phase is important to allow the heart to contract properly and to allow the blood to expel the chambers, right? Whether it's atria or ventricles. The heart needs time to squeeze blood, okay? And that's why this stage is prolonged, because when you're in action potential, keep in mind when you're depolarizing, you cause contraction, okay? And while the heart is contracting, the chambers are squeezing out blood, okay? And at the end of the plateau phase, these calcium channels shut close. Calcium is transported out of the cell, and at the same time, the potassium channels open up. The potassium channels rapidly transport potassium ions out of the cell, and the cell returns to its resting membrane potential. So unlike the pacemaker cells, the cardiomyocytes cannot just generate an action potential without a stimulus. Now this period, which is the absolute refractory period, is simply the period during which a new action potential is not generated. Why is this important? Again, the stage is important because the absolute refractory period allows the heart to completely contract and the chambers to squeeze or fill with blood before the next contraction begins. So it's very important that we give the heart muscles enough time to contract before it receives another action potential. So you see the green line over here is the action potential itself, and the red curve is the muscle tension. So the muscle tension rises, and after the absolute refractory period, you can see the muscle tension rapidly falls.